Hello, I'm Phil Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my vlog, where it's both my mission and my pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes of inspiring you, giving you a specific takeaway, also that way your journey can be a little bit easier. Now, before I fully get into things, allow me to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already, that way you get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me, as I hope it does to you. So, last week, I pointed to the fact that we had 1 month to go before filming my second film. Now, we're about 3 weeks away, right? And it's interesting to look at that because, let me kind of backtrack. And in The Matrix Revolutions, and don't worry if you haven't seen it, this is not a spoiler, but there's a character named the Oracle who has this quote. Now, since the real test for any choice is having to make the same choice again, knowing full well what it might cost, I guess I feel pretty good about that choice because here I am at it again. So, filmmaking, and it's something that my friend Ian and I talk about, is like this it can be very torturous, right? Like there's a lot that goes into it, especially on an indie, ultra low budget level. But we do it because there's something within us driving it. And yeah, this idea of making the same choice twice and feeling good about it resonates, right? Because as we ramp up to filming it, there's a lot of stuff coming up that still needs to be addressed, right? One of which is obviously COVID, right? And it's not something that any of us can ultimately control. We can be as diligent about it as we can in terms of not getting COVID, but then also, just in general, how it affects the world, of what places could remain open, how it might affect flights in various places, that we just don't know, and we're not in control of. And so, there's a technique that I've talked about in the past, and I did an episode on it called negative visualization. And what negative visualization in a nutshell is, and I invite you to watch the full episode, but I'll give you just, the bullet points of it here, is when you take your worry, if you will, and instead of just having it be this nebulous thing, you actually sit down with it and figure out what are all the things that could go wrong. So that way you can actually start to solve for them, create solutions for those various scenarios, and ultimately what is the worst case. And, for me, I've thought about that because there's a lot that could go wrong and things like that. And ultimately, if something just goes completely out of our control in that way, then we did the best we could. There's still a way to salvage and make something happen, but it just depends on the scenario, right? One of the things that I said to my producer is like, listen, whatever happens, because we're filming in Colombia, whatever happens in Colombia, as long as it's me and the 5 actors, I will find a way to film this movie by hell or high water. And also, my macro idea is that, if worst came to worst, we film the exteriors that we need in Colombia, and then we film the rest here in LA, right? So there is that sort of backup plan version of it. But to a large extent, it's hard to predict some of these very, I have like an overarching idea of how to approach this, but obviously the specifics of which will depend on what comes, right? And I feel good because for me, I'm very practiced at coming up with solutions fast. I look at the totality of my life, and really that's something that I've gotten accustomed to, and now I see it as a true strength of mine, right? And one of the things, I thought about, as insane as it was, this is the level I was even thinking about it with one of my friends. I said, how terrible would it be if we filmed with a stand-in, if needed, and then replace that person later. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being absolutely insane and near impossible, to 1 being like easy breezy. And he was like, well, the thing of it is, based on how you want to shoot it, meaning we're going to have free-flowing cameras, tons of movement, it would make it very difficult. But not necessarily impossible. And it's obviously, I don't want to have to trigger that, because that would be pretty damn tough. But it's not necessarily unheard of, right? So it's no different than like filming, someone in a green screen suit, or like, like how they have stand-ins for like a dragon or whatever on set, and then that gets replaced with visual effects. It's doable. Now, on our level, yes, that's a lot of work and a lot of resources to make that happen, but doable if needed. So yeah, you just start to kind of think of it, and by no means am I like I really hope it doesn't have to come to that, but you just start like kind of figuring out these various things, and and as insane as that sounds, yeah, I go back to that quote that I opened up with from the Oracle. The real test for any choice is having to make the same choice again, knowing full well what it might cost. I guess I feel pretty good about that choice, because here I am at it again. And really, I know how difficult it is to make a movie, because I made one, and I've been part of other people's. And yeah, it's extremely difficult. But here I am, knowing full well that how this might go. But knowing that is an exciting aspect of it. And as we come to final things, we had like our penultimate rehearsal last Thursday, and that went well. We also, as part of that, did costuming. We've been individually working on the costumes for a while now, and this was kind of our moment to get together and really look at everything in its totality, see things side by side, across like, all the various actors, who would be in what scenes together. So that way we could be like, oh, does this clash? Does it work? And giving it that sort of level of thought. And it was good, right? We made some changes to the original ideas and really enhanced it in a way that I think will work visually. These are certain choices that, as an audience, they're not necessarily conscious of them in that way, but it does affect them subconsciously, right? So I think we got some good stuff, and I'm very excited by what we came up with. The other thing, as part of this, it also gets us prepped into packing, and even for me, like I've started just rehearse packing, if you will, to see like, how much space do all the props take up, my film equipment, my clothes and all that. So I know and can be like, okay, judicious of, what I absolutely need to bring, what would be like a wish list item, and what I could do without. So this is kind of where we're at in terms of everything, and going back to the idea of choices, right? One of the things, whenever you make a movie, and generally like with all art, it becomes a series of, certain compromises, right? The number will vary, right? But ultimately, yes, all art is a series of compromises, right? Just time, resources, and so forth already create various compromises. And through those compromises, you make a choice, A or B, or C or D, or however many choices you have. And it's interesting, too, because I put out my reviews of movies. I put out recommendations of things. And, not that I didn't know this beforehand, but, as we continue to discuss in the comments section with various people, some people agree with me and others don't. And, And that's to say, like, there's times that within, I'll just use movies, I like a particular choice of cinematography, lighting, sound design, whatever, and be like, I think it's absolutely brilliant. And someone will just disagree with that choice, right? And that's an interesting thought because, you know, there are certain things that, you know, just even within like my circle of friends, there's certain things that, you know, I'll raise and be like, oh, we should, you know, maybe do it this way. Like, no, I don't agree. And again, it's a choice. So, you know, instead of, and that's what you got to kind of see of like, what are you okay with? And like for me on this sort of level, you know, I embrace certain things and I lean into them rather than consider them as mistakes. And ultimately, you're never going to please anyone. Like there's some, like even Hollywood films, right? Like Marvel films. I mean, Marvel films get criticism all the time about X, Y, and Z, right? But it's a choice. You know, like for example, their action scenes tend to be quickly paced, right? Fast cuts. You don't see a lot of like close-ups and things like that. And that's a choice. And some people agree with that choice, some people don't. But it's deliberate, right? And so that's ultimately where you kind of, you at least, no matter what you're going for, you at least want to be aware of the choice that you're making. And sometimes the irony is, you don't have it, you have nothing but one choice. You know, for example, there's places that we want to film and we know we're not going to have a lot of time. That's just the nature of it. And rather than lament about it, it's like, that's why sweat it? That's what we got, so let's work with it. And because of that, we'll choose to film it in a certain way and lean into that as opposed to being like, shoot, I wish we had more time so we do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, we don't have that. So why lament over it? So yeah, that's kind of where we're at overall with the project, you know. We're finalizing like van pickups and drop-offs. We're finalizing, there's various activities we're going to in Colombia, so we're finalizing those. It's just a great sense of like, yeah, we're approaching it and we're going to be doing this, and there's an excitement there. You know, so, and one of the things that I threw out to everybody was this idea that, why don't we do it'll be an optional thing, but if we want to get together, for anybody that wants to, let's do an optional get together before we all fly out. And, you know, because like everything's been so business, and just that ability before we fly out to just relax, get to hang out, and really just bond would be fun. And I didn't want to require it because, you know, we're all already strapped for time and doing so much. But I threw it out there, and I think we're going to get most of the people involved to be a part of this, and that'll be fun. It'll, you know, generally like you do a wrap party and that's that. But I was like, we should do something beforehand, just kind of relax the nerves and just get together and shoot the shit, if you will. So that's coming up as well. We have our last rehearsal this coming week. We're focused on hair and makeup and packing and, you know, with the actors and, you know, like I said, with everything else, you know, focused on the logistics. So that's where we're at. We're just in the nitty gritty, the details, the devil's in the details, right? Anyway, thank you for taking the time to tune in. I appreciate you. If you have any questions about anything I've talked about, or questions about anything that I haven't talked about, or, you know, subject you'd like me to discuss in future episodes, please comment down below or hit me up on social media at PhilSvitek. I would be happy to converse with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to tune in, and hope to see you next time.